Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. All I can tell you is you're about to have a great episode descend upon you, so stick around for the whole thing. You know that I'm a big fan of communications theories and models, and one of the models we've discussed all the way through the podcast is the public speaking model. Now, if you're a first-time listener to the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast, I want to welcome you, and I know you'll find this episode worthwhile, and so I'm going to invite you to start listening to the podcast from the beginning. With that said, the public speaking model is the blueprint for delivering a presentation of any kind. You can give your presentation any way you want, but the public speaking model will make your effort even more worthwhile. And here is the public speaking model. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That's it. That's the public speaking model. See, I'm always looking for teaching opportunities, and now you know about the public speaking model. And here it is in action. Here are the topics we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, or your EQ, and we're going to discuss how your EQ might affect your sales activities. And finally, we're going to discuss the challenges you face when meeting with a new prospect, and I'm referring specifically to shyness. Ever since Mark Goulston brought it up a couple of episodes ago, I have been really focusing in on what exactly he meant by saying that I was emotionally shy. He gave me a couple of examples of how I might get past this emotional shyness, but we never really delved into what it was. And there really, other than Dr. Mark's information that he shared about emotional shyness, there really is nothing else written about it. This is his baby. However, I figured that in reality, emotional shyness couldn't be too far away from emotional intelligence and what people say is your EQ. And I thought I would look into emotional intelligence and how it related to this thing called emotional shyness. And I came away with some pretty interesting facts that have me not rethinking how I approach communication, but giving me an idea of why I approach my communications the way that I do. And I think you'll find this very interesting. My mom was a well-known and well-loved entertainer in Northeast Ohio, and she got me hooked on becoming a performer at a very early age. And when I turned 16, I was cast in a well-known stage musical, West Side Story, and I performed that show and many others in an amazing setting in front of packed houses nearly every night of the show. The theater was and still is a unique outdoor amphitheater that's not quite as big as the Hollywood Bowl, but still holds at least 3,000 people comfortably. And by the way, this theater, Kane Park, is portrayed in the movie Those Lips, Those Eyes. And I continued to work in big-name musicals for the next 6 years, after which I became a nightclub entertainer, traveling the country singing and playing guitar in hotel lounges, and that lasted until our first child, and I then began my piano tuning career. Now you may be asking, how does all of this relate to sales? Well, here's how it relates. Based on my experience, it's easy for me to walk out in front of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 people and perform. Sure, I get stage fright, but stage fright as it relates to going on stage or in front of a camera is easy for me to handle. I was told early in my acting career to treat stage fright like they're butterflies. And I'm sure you've heard the term, "Oh, I've got the butterflies." Well, I was told that butterflies are a good sign. You just need to teach your butterflies how to fly together in formation. Make the butterflies your friends. Have them work for you. Now, salespeople get stage fright. I've had students and clients and folks on my sales team that got stage fright or some other form of pre-appointment jitters. I still get a little tinge of stage fright whenever I'm going in to meet someone new or going in for a first-time appointment. And you know why? Because I'm human and I still have a little bit of a fear of the unknown. But I've learned how to handle it. It's just not that big of a problem for me. And when you have a moment, go back and listen to the last episode to my conversation with acting teacher Judy Kane. When I inquired as to her best way, her best idea for overcoming stage fright or nervousness, her answer was priceless. She said, "You're getting stage fright because you're making it about you and not the other person." That's so in keeping with the system. What was exceedingly difficult for me, and I've had to work on it, really work on it, is the ability to have an authentic conversation with someone without any agenda on my part, except getting to know them. And when I say that, I can only think back to when I was a teenager talking to a girl. I rarely had that type of conversation without a daydream of some kind of physical contact. I wasn't listening, I was plotting. My ability to talk about the hopes and dreams and common needs and wants was sorely underdeveloped, and more importantly, I didn't listen. I was always performing. I simply can't recall a time when I felt curious about other people's hopes and dreams, etc. That was a skill set that was virtually non-existent. Now, I knew deep down I was a better performer than I was a relator, so since performing worked for me, that's who I was. Except for teaching. When I was teaching or training, I was as authentic as I could be. So as I look back nearly 50 years to my early days in sales, it's easy now to see that since I didn't have a clue about what I was doing, that I would learn from the trusted voices at the time like Tom Hopkins and Brian Tracy, and I learned to sell traditionally, and I was successful. As a matter of fact, I was pretty darn good at it. Whenever I gave my presentation, my pitch, or any demo, I would come off like the Alec Baldwin character in the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. But those of you who know my story understand just how much I wasn't that salesman. However, I played one in life. I was what the part called for. I was performing. Since I was playing a role, it was hard for me to be truly authentic. I was playing my role authentically, however, it was a rehearsed authenticity, and it worked. I was really good at selling in person or over the phone, and I even ended up teaching others to sell the conventional, traditional way until I couldn't anymore. I was having a real hard time coming to terms with my contempt for the traditional way to sell. The reason for that is I hated when anyone tried to sell me in that way. Why would anyone like it more than I did? And I couldn't stop thinking about that. But the traditional way to sell had been my only tool. It was the only way I knew how to sell. I would have loved to go into a prospect and have a regular conversation that would lead to a sale, but I didn't know how to do that, and I probably wouldn't have been comfortable with that type of one-on-one conversation. My friend and psychiatrist Mark Goulston said that my initial reluctance to stop selling and just have a conversation was based on my emotional shyness. Well, I quickly did some research on shyness and emotional shyness, and I found emotional shyness is Mark's baby, but shyness as a whole, I found some remarkably interesting conclusions in a couple of technical articles. Those who are shy have a lower emotional intelligence quotient, or EQ, than their more socially adaptable counterparts. What does that mean? What is emotional intelligence? Well, emotional intelligence is your ability to monitor your own and other people's emotions and identify them correctly. It's about self and social awareness. Emotional intelligence calls for self-management and self-regulation and internal motivation. Empathy is a big part of emotional intelligence, and so are social skills. In our next segment, we're going to take a look at some of those findings, and we'll also explore how emotional intelligence just might be affecting your success. I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please contact me at closethedealwithoutselling@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as I can, or possibly even discuss your question or comment in a future podcast. And remember, you can find the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast on your favorite podcast provider, no matter where you are around the world. Look for us, and we'll be there. Okay, let's dive into the world of emotional intelligence. And I'm going to read directly from a couple of the articles. First one by Travis Bradberry, PhD. And please remember, I'm just learning about emotional intelligence too. So let's take a look at how it's affecting us in our approach to communication and relationships with other people. So here we go. When emotional intelligence, EQ, first appeared to the masses, it served as the missing link in a peculiar finding. People with average IQs outperformed those with the highest IQs 70% of the time. This anomaly threw a massive wrench into the broadly held assumption that IQ was the sole source of success. Decades of research now point to emotional intelligence as being the critical factor that sets star performers apart from the rest of the pack. The connection is so strong that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the something in each of us that's a bit intangible. It affects how we manage behavior, navigate social complexities, and make personal decisions to achieve positive results. Now, despite the significance of EQ, its intangible nature makes it exceedingly difficult to know how much you have and what you can do to improve if you're lacking. However, what follows are sure signs that you have a high EQ. You have a robust emotional vocabulary. All people experience emotions, but people with high EQs can master their emotions because they understand them and can pinpoint whether they feel irritable, frustrated, downtrodden, or anxious. And the more specific your word choice, the better insight you have into exactly how you are feeling, what caused it, and what you should do about it. So, first is you have a robust emotional vocabulary. Next, you're curious about people. This curiosity is the product of empathy, one of the most significant gateways to a high EQ. The more you care about people and what they're going through, the more curiosity you're going to have about them. Third, you embrace change. Emotionally intelligent people are flexible and are constantly adapting. They know that fear of change can be paralyzing, so they look for change that is lurking and then form a plan of action should these changes occur. Next comes, you know your strengths and weaknesses. Emotionally intelligent people don't just understand emotions, they know what they're good at and what they're terrible at. Just remember what Clint Eastwood said, "A man's got to know his limitations." Next, You're a good judge of character. Much of emotional intelligence comes down to social awareness, and the ability to read other people, know what they're about, and understand what they're going through is pretty darn important. You are difficult to offend. Emotionally intelligent people are self-confident and open-minded, which creates a pretty thick skin because you can mentally draw the line between humor and degradation. You know how to say no to yourself and to others. Emotional intelligence means knowing how to exert self-control. You delay gratification and you avoid impulsive action. Saying no to a new commitment honors your existing commitments and gives you the opportunity to successfully fulfill them. This next one is a big one. Emotionally intelligent people let go of mistakes, but do so without forgetting them. The key to balance lies in your ability to transform failures into nuggets of improvement. This creates the tendency to get right back up every time you fall. This next one really fits into the mindset necessary for the system. You give with no expectation of reciprocity. When someone gives you something spontaneously, without expecting anything in return, this leaves a powerful impression. For example, you might have an interesting conversation with someone about a book, and when you see them again a month later, you show up with that book in hand. Emotionally intelligent people build strong relationships because they're constantly thinking about others. You don't hold grudges. Holding on to a grudge means you're holding on to stress, and emotionally intelligent people know how to avoid this at all costs. Letting go of a grudge not only makes you feel better now, but can also improve your health. You neutralize toxic people. Dealing with difficult people is frustrating and exhausting for most of us. Even when things completely derail, emotionally intelligent people are able to take the toxic person with a grain of salt to avoid letting him or her bring them down. You don't seek perfection. Humans by nature are imperfect, so when perfection is your goal, you're always left with a nagging sense of failure that makes you want to give up or reduce your effort. Like I've said for 25 years, it's better to aim at the moon and miss than aim for a ditch and hit it. You appreciate what you have. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Gratitude improves your mood because it reduces the stress hormone cortisol by 23%. An attitude of gratitude plays a major role in this hormonal reduction. You're able to disconnect. Technology enables constant communication and the expectation that you should be available 24/7. It's extremely difficult to enjoy a stress-free moment outside of work when an email that will change your train of thought and get you thinking read stressed about work can drop into your phone at any time. Here's one I'm not very good at, and that's limiting your caffeine intake and getting enough sleep, which I'm okay at. It's difficult to overstate the importance of sleep to increasing your emotional intelligence and managing your stress levels. When you sleep, your brain literally recharges, shuffling through the day's memory and storing or discarding them, which causes dreams, so that you wake up alert and clear-headed. High EQ individuals know that their self-control, attention, and memory are all reduced when they don't get enough or the right kind of sleep. So, make sleep a top priority. You stop negative self-talk in its tracks. Most of our negative thoughts are just that, thoughts, not facts. And emotionally intelligent people are able to separate their thoughts from facts to escape a cycle of negativity. Now I'm going to read to you briefly from a 2009 study by Nader Haju and Arizu Fargapan, which showed that university students have a shyness rate that's predictable based on their emotional intelligence. Students with high emotional intelligence experience less shyness. So, as I look back on my EQ, I realize there is some work that I need to do. From someone who doesn't mind being in front of a big crowd, I've had to work on being socially aware. I've had to work on my empathy. I've had to worry about caring. I've had to work on listening. The greatest gift you can give to someone is to truly listen to them and pay attention. The Easier Way to Sell offers you a great tool to help raise your emotional intelligence factor in a sales conversation. I'm talking about your ability to build rapport. Now, if you'll remember, in the YES formula, R&R is one of the main ingredients for rapport and relationship. And even if you are not innately emotionally intelligent, if you use the steps that are offered in this system to create that relationship or enhance that relationship, you'll be able to bypass many of the consequences of a low emotionally intelligent communication. So, after listening to all of the reasons why a higher EQ is of benefit to you, I urge you, I invite you, I suggest strongly that you go over all of the rapport building exercises we've covered throughout the podcast, and also in your copy of the Close the Deal Without Selling Action Guide, there's an entire rapport and relationship section with activities and exercises that you can do so that you can create a rapport-filled environment and have that authentic communication. Another positive byproduct of our system is that you can avoid the most vicious cut of all when it comes to selling, and I'm talking about rejection. Remember that the Q portion of the YES formula stands for qualify/disqualify. The job of rejection is transferred to you. You no longer have to give a presentation to which somebody would say, well, I'll think about it, or I'm not interested, after you've done all your work. With this system, you get the qualification and disqualification process taken care of before you tell them or show them anything. This will reduce the byproduct created when your stress starts to move into the red zone. I'll refer to Dr. Mark one more time and the fact that he calls this move from stress at a normal level into stress in the red zone as a shift from stress to distress. I invite you to use this system so you can reduce distress almost entirely compared to the traditional way to sell. Work on your emotional intelligence, but just the fact that you now are clear of the role that your EQ plays in the sales process, that should give you the motivation to examine your ability to have an authentic communication and see if that ability is being dragged down or pulled up by your EQ. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, and I found this most interesting myself because even though I knew about emotional intelligence, I'd never really delved into it. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about this and seeing how it fits into your sales life as much as I did. I'll keep checking on it, and maybe I'll have someone on that is an expert in emotional intelligence, and they can tell us a little bit of what we need to do to become even more effective at using that EQ along with the easier way to sell. Next episode's going to be a real treat. We are going to have my friend Nikki Bassi on, and she and I are going to do a role play of the system. For those of you who've been dying to see it in action, I'm actually going to do the system for a sales call. I think it's the first time I'll be doing the whole thing in about 12 years. So, be gentle with me, but I think it's going to be fun all around. Actually, I know it will be. Hey, this is Ike Krieger. See you next time.